Hey, I want to discuss an issue that's been raised regarding well-known feminist Germaine Greer. Um, Now, I find myself in the unusual position of defending Germaine Greer. That is to say, it's very rare that I will take the side of well-known feminists. But on this occasion, looking at all the circumstances, I have to say I'm sympathetic to her. And this is the context. Um, she was due to speak at a University of Cardiff seminar, as I understand it, on women's rights. Well, no surprise there. She's one of the world's best known feminists. Um, but she didn't go because the women's officer at Cardiff University had launched a petition calling for her to be blocked because of comments that she'd made about transgender male to female people that they aren't real women, in her opinion, um, because in her view they don't have the same experiences that women have. So the women's officer said this was misogynistic, um, which is an incredible claim to make about one of the world's leading feminists, but there you have it. And she sort of started this petition to prevent her from coming. Well, Germaine Greer decided not to bother going anyway. Um, anyway, I've just watched a Newsnight interview with Kirsty Wark, completely biased. It's quite clear that Kirsty Wark had an agenda from the beginning of the interview to try and like put her on the spot and say gotcha kind of thing, and continuously pushing the same ridiculous questions over and over again. It's quite clear Germaine Greer has said what she wants to say and doesn't want to keep talking about this. So, in my opinion, it's a good example of just how toxic political correctness has become. What Kirsty Wark said was, well, isn't this offensive to some people? And Germaine Greer said, yeah, but I'm offended all the time, or I'm insulted all the time. Um, I have to say she's making a fair point with this. I do see, firstly, in a lot of British student unions, there is a deep, deep, deep intolerance from neoliberalism and the hard left. That is to say, anything that is construed as politically incorrect is automatically silenced. And this is shameful. This is something that, in my opinion, is a lot more dangerous than the bigotry or so-called bigotry that they claim to be opposing. We've got to a situation where the new left has become so narrow in its thinking and so intolerant of any other opinions that they do try to silence free speech. I think that's dangerous, and I think it's utterly odious. Um, Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that I entirely agree with Germaine Greer's view, but I do see partly where she is coming from. Um, she actually made a point. She said she is not against them having surgery. Okay. She also said that in a conversation with a trans woman, that is someone who's been born male but has had um, post assignment surgery and they identify as female, out of courtesy, she would refer to them in female nouns. So she is making it clear that, contrary to the claims that she's hateful, she would be polite and use the terms that they would prefer. But what she is saying that it is just her opinion that someone who is born biologically male cannot call themselves a woman. Now, I don't see, you know, if you, what I have an issue with this, and it is particularly noticeable with the trans trans people phenomenon in recent years, is that there is a forced conformity to this and a forced tolerance. In other words, unless you absolutely agree that someone can have surgery and then they are a woman or they are a man, then you're a hateful, disgusting bigot. I really have a problem with that sort of thinking because ultimately this all comes down to opinions. There is opinions and then there is how you treat people. Now, if someone is treating trans people in a discriminatory way, if they're being bullied, if they're being discriminated against, etc., that is wrong. But simply saying that you don't agree that because someone calls himself male or female, then they are, that to say that that is to try and force people to agree that just because someone says they are something, they are something. I mean, put it this way, you could have someone who suffers from a mental illness and says that they're Queen Victoria. Now, should society just accept that because in their thinking they are Queen Victoria? The fact of the matter is there is a very, very small number of people who have had post-assignment surgery. And Germaine Greer makes a good point. Not all of them are content post-assignment. So I do think we're going down a questionable path of forced acceptance. This is very, very different from speaking out against people being actively discriminated against. And there has been hate crimes against trans people. There's a Brandon Tina case in Nebraska in 1993, I believe it was. So when hate crimes occur, that's a totally different matter. Because they are what they are, they're hate crimes. But someone simply saying their opinion, the real issue here is the intolerance of those who are forcing Germaine Greer to accept their view. It's utterly odious. And in my opinion, that sort of forced conformity should have no place in a democratic country. People should have the right to whatever opinion they have. It's different from actively discriminating against someone. And I more or less share. I said at the start I don't agree with her view. Well, that's not entirely true. Fuck it. I do partly agree with her view. I don't believe that just because someone doesn't feel they are what they're born with and they then decide to mess around with their genitalia through an operation, you it's my understanding that you will never have a 100% situation where they will be 100% biologically female. Does that mean you should hate them or discriminate against them or make them uncomfortable or anything else? Of course not. Call them woman, whatever. But we're getting to the point where this issue is becoming so politically correct that it's just becoming ridiculously awkward. People cannot have basic communication on this issue. Now some people may say that she shouldn't have mentioned it all, but I think she mentioned it in the context that she was asked, and it's clear that she isn't going on about this issue. I think that this is the thing. Public figures, especially, have to be ultra careful what they say, because then PC police and the BBC is full of them, and Channel 4 to some extent. But I think Newsnight is can't quite remember. I think it's part of Channel 4. But a lot of major media networks are guilty of this witch hunt against anybody who doesn't fit into the politically correct norm. But like I said, Germaine Greer is not my favourite person in the world, and I have often attacked third wave feminism. But on this occasion, I found myself sympathetic to her, or at least um, in defence of her, because I think she's being pilloried and attacked in a way that is totally disproportionate to the situation. All she has said is she doesn't agree that someone who's had post assignment surgery is a woman. She hasn't said she hates them. She hasn't said anything like, she hasn't called them freaks or anything like that could be construed as hateful or stirring up hatred. She has simply stated her opinion. In the end of the day, anyone can claim to be offended by anything. People can ridicule my hair color, which is something beyond my control. It may annoy me, it may hurt me, but at the end of the day, I can't force them not to have that opinion. Maybe that's not a good example. Maybe they could say they don't like people from Northern Ireland. Again, would it irritate me? Yes. Would I think they're a bigot? Yes. Can I say that they should be silenced? No, I can't. You cannot police opinions outside of opinions that are visible threats. Now, if Germaine Greer was calling for violence against trans people, then yes, that's a totally different matter. But I am so sick. I am so sick of toxic political correctness. And British students' unions are among the very worst bodies for doing this. So that woman's officer, to me, should be pretty happy in a police state. I mean, I don't know why she thinks she has the right to silence free expression. Why not invite Germaine Greer and then in the question session push on those views, have a debate? Universities are supposed to be a hub of free expression. They're supposed to be a hub of free thinking and discussion. And I'm sick and tired of the new left trying to shut down any views that they don't like. And the new left, quite frankly, when I say new left, I'm talking about this new wave of extreme political correctness. Now, in the 70s, there was radical views, but at least back then, this sort of political correctness really is a relatively new phenomenon. I'd say it began roughly in the 80s onwards. Prior to the 80s, there were contentious views, there was bigotry, etc. But for the most part, people just juked it out. They debated issues. I think the only time that free speech should be curtailed is if there is a clear and audible threat. That's the only time. I don't believe in shutting people down simply for having controversial views. People say, well, it gives them a platform, but you know, it's everything has to be in proportion as well. Now, I criticize, for example, media networks giving Katie Hopkins a platform, but the thing is, the key thing is there. I never said that she shouldn't be allowed an opinion. I can't stand Katie Hopkins. I think she's a disgusting woman. I think her views are despicable. But I've never advocated shutting her up. What I have said is that she shouldn't be given a platform that she doesn't deserve because I don't think she. I mean, who is she? She's not. She's famous for being famous. That's the issue I took with that. I never said that she can't have her opinion, and that's the difference. The new left actually want to silence people. Now, Germaine Greer, whatever people think of her, is a very established person in her field. She's published numerous books. She's one of the world's leading feminists. She's established in her field. So she is a notable person, whether you agree with her or not. And like I say, there's many occasions I've strongly disagreed with her. But there is one thing I respect about Germaine Greer, and that is she sticks to her guns. She says what's on her mind. She doesn't care about political correctness. I do respect that because when you take that approach, you run the risk of being pilloried and being vilified. And that's what's happening. But, I think um, ultimately this comes down to opinions. Now, if you're a trans person and you're offended by anything I'm saying, I'm sorry. It is really not my intention to hurt you. And if it has hurt you, that's all I can say is I'm sorry because it is not my intention. My principal focus here is free speech, you know? If you're a trans person and you're watching this, feel free to criticize me or whatever. But you know what? I'm going to allow your opinions because, unlike the University of Cardiff, I'm not going to shackle free expression. I completely support your right to gender reassignment, but I more or less share Germaine Greer's view in that simply having gender reassignment surgery doesn't give you a right to force others to say that you are female. You yourself have the right to call yourself that. But it's a bit like if you are, I'll make an analogy. Let's say you're born in country A, but your whole life you're very fascinated by the culture, the language, the traditions of country B. One day you decide to describe yourself by the nationality of country B, even if you weren't born there. It's more or less the same thing, because ultimately this comes down to personal identity, and that's sacred. But you know what? So is free speech.